Hello everyone and welcome back to a critical retrospective. Yes, I know, it's been a really long time since I last made a video. Well, a proper video, because the Q&A video doesn't really count, does it? Anyway, the point is, it's been too long, and I'm looking forward to jumping back into my YouTube channel and going full throttle into this. Back in December, I promised that I was going to make a Harumi video one day, and here we are, almost 3 months later, finally making good on my promise. If I'm gonna be honest for a second, I'm not exactly confident on how well this video will do. After all, I feel like the miraculous video essays are the main draw for my channel. However, I feel like I've attracted more than enough Ninjago fans to warrant this video's existence. That's the thing about YouTube, isn't it? Every new video's a roll of the dice. I don't really mind though, because I'm going to absolutely love making this video. Harumi is one of the best written antagonists in all of fiction, in my opinion. The voice acting, the writing, the music, it all comes together to create such a flawlessly tragic villain. So, enough preamble, without further ado, let's get into why Harumi is one of the best characters I've ever watched on screen. Until Crystalized. Harumi was introduced to the show as the Princess of Ninjago and not as a villainous character at all. In fact, for the vast majority of Season 8, she's an ally of the ninja. The writers very deliberately tried to make us really like Harumi and her character so that they could rip the rug out from underneath us in Episode 6. She's a twist villain done right, because all the clues are there, but it's up to the audience to figure them out and piece them all together. Harumi was introduced in Season 8, Episode 1, The Mask of Deception. She's the one who called the ninja to the palace to try and get them to stop the Sons of Garmadon from reuniting the 3 Oni masks to revive Garmadon. She doesn't have that much of a personality or character in her first episode, but that's intentional. They're going to gradually build things up later, so this is a pretty good starting point, leaving us wanting more. Fairly quickly, it's evident that Lloyd and Harumi get along with one another and also seem to have some feelings for one another. This is showcased for the first time in episode 2 when Harumi runs away to feed the poor. She claims that if she asked her parents, who are the Emperor and Empress of Ninjago, they never would have allowed it because it's very dangerous for a princess out in the streets. And so that's why she sneaks out to do good by the people of Ninjago in secret, but Lloyd catches up to her, and they bond incredibly quickly. They share each other's feelings about how they seem like they're unable to live up to the responsibilities handed down to them. Lloyd lets his guard down around Harumi, and Harumi loosens up around Lloyd. They seem like the perfect match, don't they? Well, that's what we all thought back in January of 2018. The writers do an expert job of really selling you on the relationship between Lloyd and Harumi. In this first half of the season, Lloyd and Harumi's relationship and dynamic is just so effortless. Lloyd saw something in Harumi that nobody else seemed to, and that's what drew them closer together. I just want to touch on one little scene in episode 5 when Lloyd and Harumi are talking on the bounty. Harumi asks Lloyd if he remembers anything about Garmadon from when he was little. Lloyd says he doesn't because he was too young, and then asks Harumi about her parents. What Harumi says after this inquiry is incredibly interesting. She says to Lloyd that sometimes her parents appear in her dreams, but then she wakes up. This is incredibly interesting and thought-provoking for Harumi's character. As we all know by this point, Harumi was only pretending to like Lloyd in order to get herself closer to the 3rd Oni mask. However, looking back at this scene, it feels kind of ambiguous whether or not she's truly lying. It felt quite genuine the way she was looking down, very forlorn, remembering her parents. And I have to assume she's talking about her biological parents, right? Because that's her motivator for the majority of her evil actions. She wants revenge on Lloyd and the ninja for not beating the Great Devourer when Garmadon actually could. The ninja's inability to do anything to help the situation caused her parents' death. And so I can definitely see Harumi being haunted by this moment in her dreams. Who knows, maybe these frequent dreams about her parents is something that primarily drives her to keep going with her plan with revenge. As soon as Lord of the Ninja tastes the same pain she felt when she lost her parents, maybe the bad dreams will go away. And that's what makes Harumi such an interesting villain. Throughout the season, there are always these little tiny moments of ambiguity with her character that don't always add up with her larger goal. And you're left picking up the pieces yourself and interpreting them however you want to. And this is one such moment, but it's far from the only one. Harumi looking lovingly at the pictures of her parents? I don't think that was an act. After all, she's the only one in this room until Nia shows up. Speaking of Nia, there's a pretty interesting scene between Nia and Harumi here. Harumi asks Nia how Garmadon was able to change, to which Nia mentions the fact that holding a grudge is never a good thing, and only you get burned from it. At the time this episode released, we didn't really understand how this kind of advice would pertain to Harumi, but soon it became clear. She holds a perpetual grudge against the ninja, and probably has for years by this point. Who knows, maybe if Harumi took Nia's advice case, none of this horrible stuff would have happened. Although, by this point, I'd say it's too late. It's not like she even internalized Nia's message anyway. Her hatred has been internalized and festering inside her for years, and that's not going to go away so easily. Plus, she's already committed some horrible atrocities. Summoning only the evil half of Garmadon just to spite Lloyd, killing her adopted parents and blowing up the palace, crashing a flying ship, and so much more. It's so much that now there's a video on YouTube made by a Ninjago fan documenting every single crime that Harumi has committed. And that's something that the writers definitely do not forget throughout the season. Harumi is a monstrous person. She has done countless irredeemable things, and yet it's painfully clear to see how everything got to this point, judging by her backstory. Because while Harumi's backstory is incredibly tragic, they don't dwell on it for too long, because that's not what's important anymore. What's important is her actions in the present. She became a villain far worse than the Great Devourer ever was, in my opinion. Because the Devourer was a mindless being, just bent on causing destruction on instinct. Harumi is very carefully calculating exactly how she can hurt Lloyd the most. She singles out Lloyd for her revenge specifically because he's the most powerful ninja. The prophesied green ninja should have had a lot more power and ability to stand up to the Great Devourer, but he didn't. And so she wins over Lloyd just so that she can see his face when she betrays him, because she hates him that much. It's a perfect way to craft a truly evil person as your villain, while also giving them some sympathetic character traits from their backstory. If I could sum up Harumi's character in one scene, it would be this. Just look at that face, just so unbothered by Lloyd's attempts to appeal to her humanity. If anything, she's probably relishing in the fact that he's trying to do so, because it means that she meant something to him. It means that her plan worked. It means that Lloyd can't get over the loss, which is exactly what she wanted him to go through. This is what separates Harumi from all the other Ninjago villains. She holds a very specific vendetta against the main characters and tries to make them suffer as much as possible. Harumi is the first Ninjago villain who was just a regular old human being. She didn't have any ancient cosmic powers or anything, she just had enough hatred and evil in her heart to commit horrible atrocities on a human scale. It goes to show that having a painfully tragic backstory doesn't excuse you from being a terrible, awful, abhorrently evil person. It kind of reminds me of something that Just Stop said in his 3.5 hour long Ninjago video.
She wants her mindless aggression and blind resentment, the very traits she instills Garmadon with in his resurrection, to be proven right so she can know that what she's done wasn't immoral. It's something anyone in her position would have done when brought to the brink of mental collapse.
And yeah, that's pretty much the best summary that anyone probably could have given on her character. This is a very entertaining and engaging video, by the way. I highly recommend giving it a watch if you have the time. Well, if you have 3.5 hours to spare. I kind of want to build on what Just Stop was saying about Harumi's kind of sunk cost fallacy with her malevolent actions. She's invested so much in this evil plan to rid Lloyd of his happiness that if she stops now, it will have all been for naught. She's made so much of her personality centered around her hatred for some other person. So there's not really much for her to do other than keep going. Garmadon has been resurrected, and so they're going to use his dark power in order to take over Ninjago. But wait a minute, isn't this going to cause the exact same damage that caused Harumi's parents to die in the first place?
Yes!
But that's the thing, isn't it? Harumi is just so blinded by malice and hatred that she can't see the flaws in her plan or what she's actually doing. I've seen a very small amount of people online wondering just how Harumi's motivations could possibly make sense, and I'd actually like to explain. Not naming names here, and this isn't supposed to be a personal attack. I'm just trying to explain why Harumi's character does make more sense than they'd probably give her credit for. One valid question I've heard these people ask is that why would Harumi want to bring back the evil parts of Garmadon when the heroic side is what saved the day from the Great Devourer? Well, the issue lies with Garmadon's motivations. Garmadon didn't want to save Ninjago, he wanted to kill the Great Devourer, as an act of vengeance against the Great Devourer for turning him down the path of evil. He did this all in the name of something evil, revenge, and so why shouldn't Harumi do the same if it means that Ninjago will be safer as a byproduct? The day her parents died when the Great Devourer attacked, Harumi realized that sometimes you have to play dirty to get the job done. The ninja's one job was to maintain peace in Ninjago, and yet this peace was always temporary. There's a new threat every single season, and so there's never really finally time for Ninjago to settle into some kind of normalcy. Therefore, it's just better to get it all over with now. Dig up a force of darkness from the grave to oppress Ninjago and rule it with an iron fist so nobody else will do so ever again. And who's the better choice than the person who saved your life the first time around? See, the ninja are responsible for stopping threats after they happen, it seems, and that clearly wasn't enough. As they say, prevention is better than cure. This complex developed by Harumi, accentuated by her hatred for the ninja, did not create a pretty picture, did it? And to think, all of this could have been avoided if she just let go of that hatred. So focused on the past that she couldn't see how lucky she was after that fateful incident. She got adopted by the Emperor and Empress of Ninjago, something that not many people can call as something that they've had happen to them. But it's not that simple, is it? After all, the Emperor and Empress put her under very strict supervision and education, something that isolated Harumi and fostered her hatred even more. It's an incredibly isolating environment to grow up in. Considering the fact that Harumi loves her birth parents dearly and adores her old life, being thrust into something so formal and proper probably was very jarring for her. According to my research, there was a book released all about Harumi's childhood, to which she states that she never believed her foster parents loved her at all. I believe that Harumi was actually projecting somewhat when she was claiming that, given that after her parents died she began to hate the ninja, and so I don't believe there was any room in her heart for love post that event. She had been burned so badly psychologically that it's going to be hard for her to accept new people into her life who she can engage with in a positive manner. That's why she immediately took to manipulating Lloyd, because she hated him and the ninja, and because she didn't remember what love truly was for so many years. It's such an interesting idea for an antagonist. Somebody motivated by hatred not only because they feel it in their hearts, but also because they've never known anything else for so long. Harumi can definitely pretend that she cares about people, as shown through her interactions with Lloyd in the first 6 episodes of Sons of Garmadon. And this is one aspect of her character and Lloyd's character that is just downright heartbreaking. The thing is, Harumi and Lloyd had such great chemistry. The kind of chemistry that elicits feelings of purity and warmth. I could definitely understand Lloyd believing that their friendship/relationship was genuine, which is why it's just so hard to watch Harumi completely rip out the rug from underneath him and show her true colours and how she truly feels about him. It's a very effective betrayal. Or is it?
Traitor characters often also act like a completely different person after the reveal, which can make sense depending on how much of an act they were putting on for the other characters, but can also weaken the impact of the betrayal. Part of what makes this trope hit so hard is that it forces the characters in the audience to try and reconcile what they already know about the traitor with the new information about them. It recontextualizes their previous actions and makes the audience and characters question how much of what they know about them was a lie. This means if it turns out everything was a lie, the gut punch is basically gone. If the only gut punch is that the traitor character tricked their allies about their entire motivation and personality, the only thing the other characters are likely to feel about the whole situation is anger that they were tricked. You can't mourn the loss of something that never existed, and mourning is a huge part of what makes this trope hit.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do something that's very out of character for me. I'm gonna do something that's known as calling out. Okay, no, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm just gonna politely respond, because as much as I love overly sarcastic productions, I can't help but feel like they're missing something here. I mean, I do agree with the fact that characters who have been betrayed by other characters will definitely feel angry about the fact that they were tricked by them, but I feel like that's only really just one side of the story. A traitorous character who tricked the protagonists about their entire motivation and personality will probably elicit more than one emotion from those protagonists. I mean, maybe it would be the case if the protagonist and the traitorous character were only aligned in similar goals, and that was pretty much the end of it. But if the protagonist grew close to this fake persona, I have a feeling it would be a lot harder to just be angry at them. I mean, don't get me wrong, Lloyd was still angry at Harumi and angry about her betrayal. But then in episode 9, we see Lloyd kind of brooding in the corner while the rest of the ninja are celebrating the defeat of the Quiet One and the Sons of Garmadon, and Misako can tell that Lloyd still loved Harumi. Imagine learning that somebody you cared about so very much actually hated your guts the whole time. I'd actually argue that, yes, you can mourn the loss of something that never existed, because your heart just can't accept the fact that it never existed. After all, if the traitorous character really wasn't lying about their entire motivation and personality and really did care about the protagonist deep down, then there is some potential to reconcile with them, isn't there? And so I'd argue it's even more heartbreaking if the entire personality and relationship between the traitorous character and the protagonist was all a lie. Because there's no saving such a relationship, there's no rekindling it because it was completely one-sided. All you can do is pick up the pieces and try your best to move on. As you can probably tell, I was deliberately being vague with my language. I wasn't explicitly talking about Harumi and Lloyd, but rather just people, because Harumi is one of those realistic villains. She's a selfish manipulator who takes advantage of other people's emotions for her own benefit. And she doesn't care who she gets in the way of in order to accomplish her goals, and she definitely doesn't care about the people who she believes wronged her in the past. In fact, she goes out of her way to make their lives as miserable as possible. Despite her tragic backstory, she's become just as evil as the Great Devourer ever was. And I'm really curious to see how Harumi's character is developed further in the next season, and I'm sure you guys are excited to hear me talk about it as well. Harumi's character is picked up masterfully from the previous season. She's given a lot less screen time than she did in Sons of Garmadon, mainly because we're split between two stories in the First Realm and in Ninjago. But to look on the bright side, that means that whenever she does appear on screen, it really means something. Now that Harumi has resurrected Garmadon, Garmadon has become the new ruler of Ninjago and has laid waste to it. Quite a few of Harumi's scenes this season are devoted to her being quite scared of Garmadon and almost regretting her choices to resurrect his evil half. It's definitely a change of pace, as from the end of season 8 onwards, Harumi was kind of manipulating Garmadon and using him as a pawn, but as his intelligence grows, Harumi's grip on him seems to decrease, and Garmadon starts to treat her much more coldly than he did before. But to be fair, if she didn't resurrect him in the first place, none of this would have happened. She's being treated by Garmadon the same way she's been treating other people in her life, especially Lloyd. It shows her the other side of the coin for once, and might force her to re-examine her priorities. But that's not really an option at this moment in time, is it? Because she's invested so much time and energy into reinforcing herself as this black hole of hatred and malice. And so the best way out of this situation is to dig the hole deeper, to re-ingratiate herself with Garmadon and hopefully get a better position than the one she currently has. And how does she do this? Well, she becomes Garmadon's surrogate daughter, effectively stripping Garmadon of his last connections to his old self. Because Garmadon is Lloyd's father, not Harumi's. Harumi is only thinking of herself here, trying her hardest to escape an inescapable situation and an unavoidable demise. Not only that, but Harumi seeks to replace Lloyd so that Garmadon will have no qualms with killing his actual son. She even rubs it in his face the first chance she gets, reinforcing the idea that she's doing this just to hurt him. But when is she going to finally see sense? When is she finally going to realize that all she's been doing is making things worse for herself and the people she cares about? Well, she has this eye-opening experience in episode 8, Saving Faith. This is Harumi's final episode this season, and it's the perfect end for her character. Harumi is put in direct danger of Garmadon's giant monster thingy, and so she tries to find a way to escape the building that she's in order to keep herself safe. She finds a way out until she finds a kid crying because his parents are about to sacrifice their lives to keep him safe. This is exactly what happened to Harumi, which led her down the path of villainy in the first place, and so she sees herself in this boy. Realizing the mistake and the consequences of her actions, she decides to prevent this boy from becoming the same person she became that day. It reminds me of something that Lloyd said to Harumi right at the end of season 8. He tells Harumi that what she's doing is just going to create more versions of herself. She dismissed him at the time, but it feels like that now she's starting to realize that he had a point. If she can save at least one life, at least one person could be prevented from becoming like her, then she can be happy. I feel like a hypothetical question to this would be, well, why does Harumi all of a sudden care about this person when she didn't care about the millions of people she was putting in danger in season 8? Well, Lloyd was just spouting statistics at her. There wasn't really anything human or emotional to grasp onto. It's painfully easy to trivialize your wrongdoings when you don't really see the dirty details of the consequences. But this narrows it down to one single family. There's no ignoring something that's right there before your very eyes. And given the similarities between this family and her own, then of course Harumi has to help them. Because if she doesn't, then that's basically invalidating her traumatic past, which was the crux and linchpin of everything she's done since then. Unfortunately, Harumi isn't able to get out of the building in time, and she dies. And it wasn't a kind death either. It was probably very, very painful because a building fell on her. And apparently, the creators of Ninjago did not discuss any other outcome for Harumi's death, which is brutal. but fitting nonetheless. All of the storylines that Harumi has been a part of have been basically concluded, having her realize that she's a monster and that it's far too late for her to fix any of her mistakes and earn the trust back of the people she's wronged is the perfect conclusion. This death scene is absolutely magnificent in terms of the cinematography and the music and just basically everything. It's the perfect end. A tragic end for such a tragic character. Someone who has suffered so much and yet has also caused so much suffering. Someone who has burned so many bridges over the years trying to prove that the ninja aren't worth anybody's adoration. And yet here she is in her final moments with nobody to protect her because she pushed them away. It's very poetic how Harumi doesn't get a happy ending. Rather, it's bittersweet knowing that we're losing such a great character, but while also armed with the knowledge that there's no other way her character could go. Harumi, more than anything, is a warning. A warning not to let one's hatred and ire overtake them to the point where it over-encompasses everything else about them. To live their life to the fullest, to let go of old woes, and to fix old mistakes before it's too late. So you want to know how the new writers messed everything up in the final season?
Well, I needed enough players for my villainous volleyball team, of course.
Pick up steam, make a scheme, shout and scream, support your team, shine like a beam and live the dream. Mario the dream.
Yeah, if it wasn't immediately obvious by that intro sequence, Harumi's character is in total opposition to everything she was supposed to be in seasons 8 and 9. It's actually hilarious just how low she falls. One of my favourite characters in the entire show and my favourite villain in all of Ninjago reduced to...
What? I'm clearly trying to leave in a dramatic way.
Pick a hair. Which hair do you like best? Just reach inside your soul. Make a choice. Make a choice. Strut your stuff on the runway. Strut your stuff. Okay, strut your stuff. Looking good. Looking good.
Now this is the first thing I want to get off my chest before we get into the heart of this atrocity. The humor. You might be asking, what's my problem with the humor? Is it the fact that Harumi is making really bad jokes? Well, no actually. My issue is that Harumi is making jokes at all. This just wasn't her personality in seasons 8 and 9. She was crazy, but she was also really serious at the same time. Very serious about her goals and refusing to let anything stand in the way of her mission. Every scene she shared with the other characters was serious, impactful, and left a mark on the watcher. But now, I feel like half the scenes Harumi shared just don't feel necessary because it doesn't feel like the same character as before. For example, I think I'm just gonna point out one little thing that I noticed at the end of episode 13. When Harumi spews that stupid volleyball line from her mouth, Lloyd asks if she's serious, to which Harumi says, of course I'm not serious, and then Lloyd says, it's hard to tell with you sometimes. Then Harumi says that she can't believe Lloyd is the leader of the ninja with a mind as gullible as his. Then Lloyd says, I don't normally fall for things like that, but I'm a little frustrated and confused right now. That's a whole 17 seconds down the toilet. 17 seconds wasted on a pointless conversation which hinged on a joke that the real Harumi never would have made in the first place. But that's not the only garbage that episode 13 has to shove in our faces. Apparently, at the end of season 9, Lloyd went to search the rubble of the building to try and find Harumi? Why? Did the writers of the new seasons just ignore the fact that Lloyd and Harumi weren't exactly pals in season 9? Did they just forget all the times Harumi tried to hurt or even actually kill Lloyd? After all of this, after all of the pain that Harumi has caused Lloyd, you expect me to believe that Lloyd went searching for Harumi's dead carcass at the end of season 9? I thought that he achieved closure with Harumi at the end of season 8 when he told her to shove off, but I guess not. I guess Lloyd always had feelings for Harumi and still hasn't let them go for some reason. And the weirdest part, Harumi is actually moved by his love confession? Hey, guys, whatever happened to, Harumi actually tricking Lloyd and never caring about him, which was the point of her character? Well, I guess that's not the case anymore, which brings us to my next point. Lloyd and Harumi's contradicting personalities, episode by episode, and sometimes twice in the same episode. When Harumi tells Lloyd that his friends are all dead, Lloyd exclaims that Harumi's gonna pay for this. But then at the end of the episode, Lloyd is back to trying to turn Harumi over over to the good side. It's like the writers just can't decide exactly how Lloyd should feel about Harumi. I'm getting the idea that these guys just haven't seen season 8 or 9 and so don't really know how she's supposed to act. Not to mention her forsaking of Garmadon and embracing the power of the Overlord for some reason. I mean, Harumi's whole thing has been being a cult leader for a group of Garmadon lovers. So why did she join the Overlord? The very embodiment of evil itself, somebody who everybody knows is gonna destroy the world. Harumi even says that she can't serve him because he'll destroy everything. But I guess all it takes for her to join his side is for the Overlord to say,
"Light and darkness. One of us has to win at some point, so it might as well be me, right?"
And that's pretty much all it takes for Harumi to start kneeling at his feet and serving his every will. As for announcing her admiration of Garmadon, it's slightly more believable, I suppose. After all, Garmadon kind of caused Harumi's death by refusing to back down from piloting his weird monster thingy. And on the verge of death, Harumi realizes that Garmadon was the wrong person to put her faith in. And now the Overlord, presenting himself as somebody far stronger, promises to protect Ninjago by giving it peace in the dark. But that just kind of begs the question, doesn't it? If Harumi realized that following a really strong dark power to protect Ninjago wasn't going to work for her, why would she do the same thing again? Come to think of it, I thought she had a moment of clarity after saving that family at the end of season 9, so why is she full on evil again? Hang on, what's that? You're saying that they only brought her back for fan service without considering how this would impact the greater story and her character as a whole? Now, that makes much more sense than whatever I was saying. How about we cut straight to the point then, shall we? Let's get straight to the heart. The point of no return. Harumi's redemption. Tell me, how would you describe the words Harumi and redemption?
Two words that have no business being together at all.
Yep, that's pretty much how I feel about this whole fiasco. Harumi's redemption just comes out of nowhere, and while I can kind of see that they were building up to it, that doesn't mean that it's a good idea, because I don't think it was. The fact that they had to give Harumi an uncharacteristically large amount of sympathy towards Lloyd this season says it all, I think. The fact that they're trying to rework Harumi's character from the ground up to make this redemption make more sense probably should have clued them in it wasn't a good idea. So let's get to it, shall we? In the final battle, the Overlord out of nowhere says that he was the one who controlled the Great Devourer, and that causes Harumi to finally realize what she's been doing is wrong and to fight the Overlord with Lloyd and the ninja and Garmadon. This just kind of came out of nowhere, and I don't really feel like Harumi earned this redemption even slightly. And then at the end of the season, she's just allowed to be with everybody else and makes up with Lloyd and helps to rebuild the monastery for some dumb reason. I mean, is everybody just forgetting that this is literally all Harumi's fault? I mean, if she did literally nothing, then none of this ever would have happened. She freed all of the other villains from prison to be part of the Council of the Crystal King, and yet they're all defeated, and she's the only one left off scot-free. Why? Because of her tragic backstory. Because season 8 and 9 made it very clear that this wasn't an excuse for her actions. She has done some absolutely deplorable things in her own right, and so it's not really fair to handwave all of that away because of why she's doing it. But Crystalized seems to forget all of that. Once Harumi is resurrected from the dead, she acts completely differently, all because they want to set up a redemption that only lasts 2 minutes. If you bring back a character and have them act in complete opposition to everything they were supposed to be, and doesn't really feel like the same character anymore, are they really? Is this really Harumi or some kind of visual facsimile? Because nothing about this character feels like it was meant to be Harumi at all. From the weird jokes to her redemption to her dynamic with Lloyd, all of it feels completely opposite to what it was before. It feels like they just don't know what they're doing, which maybe they don't. After all, Crystalized was written by 6 different people, and I'm guessing that these 6 different people had very different ideas on how to handle Harumi's character, which definitely explains a few things. I mean, Harumi's portrayal in Crystalized doesn't ruin her character in the Oni trilogy or make it harder to watch per se, but it does make it slightly weird. Before, the end of Harumi's character was falling from a skyscraper after realizing the weight of her immoral actions, while also realizing that it's far too late for her to make up for her misgivings about everybody, actively choosing to hold on to her hatred for the ninja despite being given multiple chances to live a better, happier life. And this is where it got her. But now that Crystalized came around, Harumi ends the show on good terms with Lloyd and everybody, despite trying to kill them multiple times. The final shot of Harumi in the show isn't this anymore, it's this. It's such a disappointment for such an amazing character. I'm just gonna try and ignore Crystalized when I talk about Harumi in the future, if I ever do. I just hope that Ninjago Dragons Rising, the reboot to the show, has way better writing than this. Let me know in the comments if you want me to review it in the future. I haven't seen it yet, but with enough demand, then I definitely will check it out, don't worry. In conclusion, not counting Crystalized, Harumi is one of the best written villains and characters in all of fiction. She was introduced in such a nonchalant and ambiguous fashion, and the tragedy between her and Lloyd just made for such an intriguing watch. The writers of the old seasons really made you care about her, to the point where her betrayal started to sting us as well. She's one of the most unique and earnestly human villains in the entire series. Somebody corrupted by their terrible circumstances and striving to get revenge on the people she believes wronged her. No other Ninjago villain has ever tried to hit the hero so personally before. Her hatred of the ninja for failing to save her parents twisted itself into an admiration of Garmadon, who was strong enough to stop the damage. Following the strongest side was a strategy used by Harumi to keep herself from getting hurt again. And yet it also caused so many people to feel the same pain she suffered. And yet she doesn't really care, does she? Because as long as they're not dead, then they can put up with anything, right? It shows a kind of myopia on Harumi's end. An unwillingness or even an inability to see the consequences of her actions and how it's affecting others. And this short-sightedness guided her through every action she took. And by the time she finally regained her sight, it was too late. Harumi's story, first and foremost, is a tragedy. A cycle of grief and vengeance that could only be stopped by somebody looking at themselves and trying to be better than their circumstances. By refusing to inflict the same pain that they felt onto others. By trying to do the right thing, no matter how hard it may seem. But Harumi did the opposite. She threw away a happy life to follow her hatred, channeling a very destructive force within herself. And it destroyed her, despite how avoidable it was. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Yes, I know, it's been a really long time. If you've been keeping up with my community posts, you'll know that I had mocks in February, so I didn't have much time for video essays. But now my schedule is free, so you should expect more stuff from me in the future. I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for being so patient with me. I know it's not easy to see a content creator that you like to watch just disappear for a really long time without much of an explanation. I thought it would be valuable to be transparent with you guys so that you wouldn't think I just quit YouTube like so many people seem to be doing nowadays. There is definitely value in stepping away when it starts to negatively impact your health, but I don't plan on stopping anytime soon in case you were worried. I've discovered and interacted with so many wonderful people thanks to this YouTube channel, and I don't plan on abandoning you guys. Even in spite of schoolwork, it'll teach me to manage my time. So, I hope you look forward to the stuff I have coming out next. The Gabriel video should be out by the end of March, early April, give or take a few days. I hope you look forward to it, and I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been a critical retrospective, and I'll see you all in the next video essay.